it does feel weirdly coincidental when we're recording this episode. It wasn't intentional. I mean, the night we were going to record last time was the election night. So I guess it would, it would have been kind of oddly prescient either way, you know, and at times Bob Roberts looks like a better candidate at times. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't know how we talk about this movie without getting inherently political. I know that, you know, we, as in me, who does this full time, you as the guest, but me as the person who does this full time, apparently people in creative fields' opinions are less valid because we're in creative fields than the welder down the street or the woman who waits tables at the restaurant, because they're allowed to have opinions and people work in the creative field aren't. Or is that just people much more successful than me? You know what I mean? Like, you see all the celebrities and actors using their platform for what a lot of us consider to be positive, but then a lot, you know, there's a minority of people that consider it to be negative, or however you want to look at it, either way. And people are always like, well, that's, you know, he's just an athlete or he's just an actor. And it's like, wait. My profession should not discount my opinion.
Yeah, but they just have a larger megaphone.
Right. Which, you know, I would contend, and I'm sure you might agree, if I have a larger megaphone, me personally, I would be using it for what I perceive to be positive. Perception is reality anymore.
But how do you think you or other people would take it? I'm just putting this out there. I don't feel one way or the other about it. I guess I have my own
feelings. Are you
feelings,
just asking questions?
I'm just asking questions. So in the same way, celebrities get in your feed and get on your screen to tell you about, to go out and vote or tell you about a certain thing. If your mechanic, every time you went to go get an oil change, handed you a flyer on what to vote for, would you be like, what the hell? Or would you be like, oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, mechanic. I think it's more widely accepted when those creatives are giving you something. You're like, oh, thank you. I'll think about that, or you won't think about it at all.
Right.
But if a mechanic or somebody that's not in a role like that does the same thing, you might be like, whoa, what are you doing?
Well, I mean, you know, I operate on a referral process as a human being for the most part. Like, if I need something fixed at my house that I can't fix myself, you know, because I consider myself pretty handy. I know you consider yourself pretty handy. There are some things you can't fix. So the first person I'm going to ask is somebody that I know whose opinion I trust or who hires people to fix things.
Yep.
So, you know, in a lot of ways, I'm like, what validators or what confirmers do my friends have other than I trust that you're giving me a good person to work with or hire or whatever, like, because you're not going to lead me astray because we're friends. That's it. Like, But, you know, I don't know if you know Dick One about tile flooring, you know, or vinyl flooring or anything. So like,
but I know a guy,
right? They did a good job. And it's like, but do you know they actually did a good job, or do you assume they did a good job? It's, again, like, my confirmer is that you're my friend. You might not be an expert on any of these things and not even know if the person you hired did a good job, but you stand by it. And that's what it is. And like, I think to your point, I don't know how I would feel if someone I knew was like, this is who you should vote for. I just think people don't like to be told what to do. And I think people like to complain in guise of whatever, that they don't like to be told what to do. Instead of just saying, don't tell me what to do, that, well, their opinion. It's like, fuck you. Just say you don't want to do what other people tell you to do. Like, I don't understand why that's so hard. If you don't want to do something, don't do it. You know, and if you don't do it and there are consequences, well, I hope you knew what the consequences were before you decided not to do it. Like, yeah, ultimately, the only people that are in charge of the choices that they make are you and me, you know, ourselves. So I don't know. It's fucking weird. I think all of it's weird.
Some people lead and some people follow.
And some people sit in front of a group. Some people sit on a stage and sing bigoted, racist songs in the guise of pleasant, I guess, homey folk music. Because on this episode of the Kulturecast, I am still the host, Chris Dashy, much to the chagrin of many, and I am joined by my good friend, all the way from, well, it's right down the street. Him and I used to work at a little brewery together whose name I won't say, but they didn't know that there was a sex thing associated with those abbreviations.
I wonder where you're going with that for a second.
Yeah, well, so they should have looked before they came up with that name. Your friend and mine, Just Dustin.
Yeah. Don't send me hate mail.
I'm just Dustin. I'm not that Dustin. I'm just Dustin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on this episode, we're talking about a little film that, people like to talk about. Well, we're living in idiocracy right now, guys. It's so stupid. No, we're living in 1992's spiritual successor in a lot of ways, but kind of spiritual follow-up. I guess you could even say this is a good double feature to Spinal Tap, a movie that's essentially just political Spinal Tap, Bob Roberts.
America is a mess. We need someone to clean it up. And his name is Bob. Bob Roberts, millionaire businessman, fencing enthusiast, recording artist, and senatorial candidate.
But they'll complain and complain and complain.
Here was a man that not only had a brilliant mind and a wonderful wit, but could also sing.
This land is my land.
Bob has a great vision for the future of our country and a great vision for the future of the children of our country.
Hey, mister, can I see your gun?
He's amazing. He's a poet and a genius.
Ladies and gentlemen, why can't you get ahead?
She's a beautiful girl.
Why can't you have the home of your dreams?
Miss 3 Mile Island. Wall Street rap. Michael takes a loan from a Midwestern.
The 60s are over, said Roberts.
I couldn't agree more, Donna.
I'm sorry, but I wouldn't vote for you. My life depended on it.
Are you a communist?
Excuse me?
Paramount Pictures presents with Miramax Films, Bob Roberts, a man with a solution.
Choice to be what you want to be. And I want to be rich.
That's what politics is really about.
Make your judgments if you must.
Bob Roberts. Because Bob spelled backwards is still Bob.
I just wish there was a way I could vote for you 100 times.
Oh, there is, actually.
Really?
Yes. Just kidding.
The film is written and directed by Tim Robbins. Yes, that Tim Robbins. Susan Sarandon's live-in partner, Tim Robbins. And it stars Tim Robbins playing his character from SNL. Yes, this was a thing before it was a movie. A folk singer who's a conservative Republican in the vein of, I guess it's a little Ronald Reagan. It's if Ronald Reagan was a singer, not an actor in a lot of ways. But we'll talk about the real life implications of this movie. But Tim Robbins plays a conservative politician who also is a folk singer that is running for running for the senatorship of Pennsylvania. Throughout the film, it is filmed cinema-verite style. It is a documentary or a mockumentary because, if you were to watch the movie, and I think we'll talk about whether or not you should, it is a documentary. It's not really a movie. It's a documentary, but a mockumentary. I don't like that term for a number of reasons. It's a faux documentary. It's a pseudo documentary, but it follows him from the beginning of his campaign to some trials and tribulations that he goes through up until the moment where he does, spoilers, get elected at the end. So all of the introduction for this nightmare of a movie aside, Dustin, you had never seen this movie before.
Right. Yeah. This is my first time.
And neither had I. So I am very curious what your take was on Bob Roberts.
It was, it was an interesting comparison to watch something that was made in 92 and have a real life comparison in the political environment we're in now. So that was kind of surreal. It was the cast of the movie. You would expect great things out of it. Was the acting all the way through the movie top notch? Probably not, but it was just being in what we're in right now. The political climate, it made it interesting to watch because it's like, wow, the whole art imitating life thing. So this idea that Tim Robbins had to make this movie came from somewhere, when this movie, that's all I could think about was this movie was written and made. It's almost like the creatives at that time were seeing like, oh, this is the road we're going down. And here we are.
It's weird. I mentioned kind of the goofy thing about idiocracy. And if you go back and listen to the idiocracy episode we did so many years ago when this podcast was very different than it is now in a lot of ways. You know, we get overtly political on that episode, and I don't know how you couldn't, because again, when people have been saying for the last decade plus since that movie came out, we're living in idiocracy, it's like, okay, but that movie has people like to the like actually like effectively brain dead, like walking zombies, and like that's part of the joke.
Oh, my balls.
Yeah, right. Like, and the number one movie that year was called Ass. Like it's like that's not there. Like if society gets there, it's not today, it's not tomorrow, it's years. I mean, that's the point that they make in the movie, is he can only get to that point because that's, you know, 1,000 years in the future. Bob Roberts is the movie that we're living in now. Bob Roberts is the movie that addresses how we've gotten to where we are now, and how people like Bob Roberts can use the outline that this movie has, because this movie didn't come up with it. This movie, like you mentioned, is looking at the reality of what was going on at the time. It looked at those things going on and saying, what would happen if we pushed it even further? And obviously, like you mentioned, life imitating art, imitating life is what we're talking about here, because not only does life imitate art, it then imitates art backwards. It goes right back out. And that's where we are now with something like this, because yes, this movie is about, and we just have to say it now. And again, our political views are unimportant in this designation. This movie, the main character is Trumpian. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know what? Like, if you don't like that, go watch the fucking movie. You would probably like the character of Bob Roberts, and that's fine. Go right ahead. That is your prerogative. The character in this movie utilizes similar tactics that we saw conservative politicians use in the 90s, in the 2000s, and now. And that's it. That's just the way it is. I mean, that's the movie that we're given. If it had been about a liberal candidate, they would have been able to roast and send up other things.
Yeah. And that's something to, I think, you're making it pretty clear, but just to reiterate, we're not adding any kind of like bias of any kind to our description of this movie. It literally is almost a guideline of the playbook.
Yeah.
For the 2016 election.
Right. And Bob Roberts in the movie is a conservative candidate. I mean, again, if he had been a liberal Democrat, whatever the fuck bullshit designator we give people anymore anyways, then we would be talking about that. But that they wouldn't make this kind of movie about that, because that's not their dirty tricks and the shit that they do, because they have their own bag of dirty tricks. You can go look up their own things, their own malfeasance that they've been involved in, because they all have been. All of the politicians have been. That's fine. This just happens to be the conservative kind of send up. And Tim Robbins is not a conservative. Tim Robbins is dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. He is a hardcore Democrat. He supports verbally, outwardly, to anybody I'm sure that will listen, any Democratic candidate for president. So he's not going to make a movie sending up the Democrats. But he could. There's no reason he couldn't. It would be fun. It would probably be pretty funny too if he did.
Could we call it Dick Richards?
Why not, right? But I think, obviously he wanted to tackle what he was seeing at the time in the world of 1990 up until 1990. It's not just 1992. A lot of this is Reagan era stuff. A lot of this is they kind of have there's a pseudo Iran Contra thing going on at one point, and the whole selling of crack to inner city youths, which it actually happened. This is, again, not conspiracy theory. The U.S. government was helping sell crack to inner cities. That was happening. If that surprises you, go look it up. If it surprises you even more, go listen to my podcast, Scary Stories We Tell, where we talk about all kinds of stuff that nobody wants you to talk about, like Project Paperclip, where our country was literally bringing Nazi scientists to this country to do work for us as opposed to the Nazis, but they're, still Nazis. But, hey, they're working for us now. So as long as the devil is in our pocket, it doesn't matter if he's the devil or not. It's like, that's not how it works. I guess it does in an arms race to the bottom, as they would say. But that's the thing about this movie that is hard to kind of look at now. And this movie made me really mad. It did. Like, I was in a intensely bad mood last week when I watched it, because I don't watch stuff like this, not because it's not entertaining. It's an immensely entertaining movie. I don't watch stuff like this because I don't sit and watch the news all the time either.
Yeah. And that's pretty much because they're following this candidate around documentary style.
Yeah.
And there's constant breaking news this or update that. And it's pretty much, it's like you're watching a big news program.
Mm-hmm. And look, that is a massive success. It is, in a lot of ways, a mockumentary version of a movie that would come out the next year, The War Room, which is about Bill Clinton's campaign for president. I mean, that's what this movie is. It's just the fictional version of that, but that movie comes out after this. And somebody saw this movie and said, we should put a camera with our candidate the entire time they're running for president, even if they don't win. And look, it in and of itself, again, your feelings on Clinton aside, inside The War Room is a fantastic movie. Like it is genuinely a fantastic documentary that's interesting, even if you don't agree with the candidates. And that's the thing about this movie. Our personal political beliefs aside, I think it should be pretty obvious where we stand at this point, given that I'm bisexual and you're raising children in this country at a time and place that we all exist in. You can still appreciate this movie, even though it's kind of a conservative hit piece, quote unquote, not on any particular person, mind you. You can still appreciate this either way as a movie that kind of says, yeah, they are up to dirty tricks. Like they are. And like you have to ask questions as a voter. Mm-hmm. And that's the important thing about this movie. It's not, it's about conservatives and how bad they are. It's like, if that's what your takeaway from this movie is, you kind of miss the point.
Exactly.
Tim Robbins just wants you to be more informed as a voter.
Yep. You don't just give blind allegiance, ask questions, know what you're getting into, know who you're supporting.
Right. I had a teacher, I guess, in high school who he was my favorite teacher that I've ever had in any grade, anything, even through college, whatever. And it has stuck with me what he wrote in my yearbook because I handed it to him. I was like, I want you to write something because you're a teacher that I know I'm not going to not think about the things that you've done in our class and the way you've taught us. And I do still think about it. And he wrote, don't stop asking questions. And I genuinely have taken that to heart as a profession in a lot of ways, but also as a human being, because I can't just listen to what someone is saying and then sit there and not ask them about it or ask more questions or do more research. And Tim Robbins doesn't want you to be a Democrat. What Tim Robbins wants you to do is be an informed voter. If you happen to learn things about the way that the people that you support and the ways that they do things you don't agree with and you vote for somebody else, that's just incidental. Mm-hmm. That's not the intent. The intent is for you to be an informed voter and an informed citizen of this country, world, and human experience, frankly. I know some people don't like to watch the news and some people like to pretend that if you don't watch the news and you're not informed, it's not happening. Yeah, that's not the case at all. And it's at all. And the problem is that mentality, that mindset is, again, part of what they're sending up in this movie. It's putting your head in the sand and only listening to the people that you agree with and only listening to the same opinion. Like, how many times can you hear the same opinion over and over again? Like, don't you at some point question whether or not everybody saying it over and over again got it from somewhere and wasn't original to begin with? It's all about honesty. And what does that mean in the political sphere? And in this movie, it's about as cynical as you can get.
Well, and even, in 92, what was I? I was 10 years old, right?
Yeah, I was fucking 2 years old.
And so, not knowing about anything in the world going on really at that time outside of like Super Mario Brothers.
The movie or the game?
The game. When it came, I had it when it came out,
Listen here, old man.
But just to see how the same tactics to stir up a base are used then, that obviously was observed in the 80s to make this movie for the early 90s. So the tactics used to stir up a base and get people to just give you complete allegiance just because of something you say, and you say it over and over again. And in this movie's case, you say it in a song because he was a songwriter or a performer and a singer, like you said, the folksy stuff, and everybody's singing along, and it's gee, if you just listen to it without listening to the words, it's like, yeah, it's a catchy song.
Right.
Then you hear what's being said, and you're like, oh, okay. And that was his megaphone, where today the megaphone is Twitter or social media. And so it's kind
Twitter
of
for now.
for now.
For now. I feel like maybe a week ago we couldn't have said for now, but I made this, I've kind of already made this joke, but I think it would stand to reason. Every time we record one of these episodes, I feel like we're going to, at the end, when we plug something, we're going to have to check in with Elon over there on Twitter and whether or not he's on fire yet, or if it's still the building that's just on fire. Because boy, I don't know how much longer we're going to have to worry about plugging Twitter. Let me put it that way. And you know what? I, for one, can't fucking wait for the day that I don't have to plug it.
Somebody needs to make MySpace great again.
Munga, whatever the abbreviation would be. I am 100% in agreement with you. That is the contemporary analog for what this movie's folksiness is Twitter. Yeah. It has to be.
Totally.
That is how a lot of the things that have happened recently happened, is because of social media's amplification of the noise. Because normally the noise on the line was just noise on the line, and you could ignore the noise and pick up the message every now and then, and the noise just kind of went by. But now the noise has been amplified to the point where people conflate the noise with the news. And it's like, for fuck's sake, guys. But this is more innocuous, and kind of in a lot of ways, I'll be honest, Bob Roberts is worse than what's going on now, only because like in that universe of Bob Roberts, because it's not reality, obviously, it's heightened reality. In the universe of Bob Roberts, those songs he's singing are not innocuous.
Nope.
And then that's the thing about recent changes in the ways politics exist, are the way things used to be was you could, be innocuous with your insults. Now it's, upfront, out in the open, calling people ugly, fat, and every other fucking insult and racial slur from here to the end of the dictionary or the end of the alphabet, but that wasn't a thing people used to be able to do and not get in trouble for it. In this universe of Bob Roberts, the things he's singing are awful, like really terrible. And I think the other really smart thing about this movie, and I think it's the smartest thing about this movie, we never really get to see, other than in really small doses, we never really see anybody who disagrees with Bob Roberts.
That's true.
We are putting it with his campaign was a stroke of genius, because everybody that we interact with throughout the movie, aside from a handful of characters, Giancarlo Esposito, John Cusack, they're all just like, yep, he's great.
Yeah, they're just little moments that whiz by.
Yeah.
In the movie.
But we never see like the world writ large and the world writ large's response to Bob Roberts. Because again, in this universe, there have to be people that disagree with him. Leanne Thigpen, who, oh my God, best part in this entire fucking movie at the beginning, where she's interviewing him on the news. I only know her from one thing. She is the chief of Acme in Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? But she rips him a fucking new one in spectacular fashion. And what's fucked up is I could see that happening in our reality. That's how well done it is. But it's one of those few moments in the film where you see kind of the light shine through.
Yep.
But they're so few and far between.
Yeah, it's in how they played like the behind the scene moment to when the camera switched on. Like she said her piece as a human being to him, what she thought of him, and then the show started and she's like, hi, we're here with Bob Roberts, and she had to kind of put all that aside because she had a job to do. But then that wore thin and she said what she wanted to say anyway. But it makes you wonder how much that happens today.
Right, yeah. Where they're just like, I cannot fucking stand you.
Yeah,
to your core.
And then the record light turns on and it's like, and we're back.
And we're back with and that's the thing. I mean, it's funny how, that's something we don't get to see in real life or hear about, obviously. And I don't think any news person would ever come out and say that, because that's a one-way ticket to losing your fucking job.
Yeah.
But the thing that I do love about this movie, it fucking called it with presidential candidates being a goddamn SNL. Like,
oh yeah,
hard. It called it so hard. It's insane. And I've got to wonder what that was like when that happened in the presidential election of 2016 because they called it, and they called I don't know if that's what happened, but they called the nonchalantness of us, society's reaction to that, because it should have been a big deal that was happening and something that, was being rejected writ large by large groups of people. And nobody even really talks about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What a platform to have to be on.
Yep. And then to totally go off script and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Live TV.
Right. Like who, what, why would anyone think that? But yet here we are. And it's exactly what happened. And it's crazy to me that the movie calls its shot so hard.
Yeah. That one especially, but multiple times.
Yeah. Like, well, then that's the thing. I mean, this movie does have like the flight of fancy with the thing that I'm surprised has never happened with the Giancarlo Esposito, a very young Giancarlo Esposito. Once again, it's like the second time I've seen him as young as this. Last time was it Toy Soldiers? No. Was it Taps? It was Taps. Was it? No, it was, it was Taps. Yeah, he's in Taps. He's really young in that. He's really young in this. But I'm surprised that that's never happened, where a political candidate has faked being assassinated or an assassination attempt.
Yeah, you'd think that's a card that would have been played by now.
Right? Like
because it's almost the next logical step for somebody to do.
Well, and to your point from before, like it's the guidebook, it's a guideline to the playbook. Like it is like
so just wait.
Yeah. Like,
happen.
Well, that's the thing. It's in a lot of ways, it is concerning because, again, everybody that they talk to in this universe is like on board with it. They don't care. Like the ends justify the means. That's all it's about. The ends are justifying the means. You want to get elected senator, which could then turn into president. You're going to fake a spinal injury. Like, there you go. Like, and again, when you are the character of Bob Roberts, who is a folk singer, but he was a businessman first. And that's the thing that I love about this movie is it's not just, well, he's a folk singer with a heart of, of a heart of coal or whatever the fuck he's made out of. He's also a businessman. And he has the ultimate evil at his heart, but you never see it. That's the thing about this movie that I really appreciate is how straight Tim Robbins plays it. It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. The scene where he's sitting there in the chair after he's been turned to be assassinated and he's reading the letter from the girl about being her Valentine is just holy shit. Just dead behind the eyes. Well, I want to do a toast to her and all the future patriot soldiers for our country. It's like, ugh, gives you chills, man.
Well, and even the different rallies they go to, they cut to scenes outside of the rally where there's like these dedicated youths. And
Lee Arenberg plays the psycho perfectly. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Pintel from Pirates of the Caribbean. The Eternal Flame from Freaked, for those of you that love Freaked as much as I do.
But they're like all standing guard outside of these rallies, or I mean, you saw that stuff happen with either side's campaigns. There's people outside that are ready to be violent. It's wild how much the movie got right. And again, I don't know how hard it is to get any of this right. I guess that's the question. Like, how hard is it to nail this? Not very hard, but I can't think of a lot of movies that nail it as hard as this movie did. And I think a lot of people have forgotten how hard this movie nails it. And I think a lot of people have forgotten this movie, like in general. Yeah.
I don't hear people talking about it. Yeah, I mean, Tim Robbins brought it up in 2016. He was like, "You did it. Bob Roberts turned flesh." I mean, I'm sure. Can you imagine how angry Tim Robbins must be on a daily basis? It's like, I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you. Nobody listened. Like, nobody listened. It's funny. Like, there are so many actors in this movie. To name all of them would be almost a waste of everybody's time, because half of the people in this movie are essentially A-listers, like Alan Rickman, John Cusack, Susan Sarandon, James Spader, Tim Robbins.
Is insane.
It's a lot of Tim Robbins' buddies. It's what it is.
He had a nice group that he hung out with.
He called in a lot of favors, or was just like, "Hey, do you want to work for SAG minimum?" Yeah, it's a mix of people. And then you've got like Gore Vidal and Ray Wise and Peter Gallagher and David Strathairn and Tom Atkins, Fisher Stevens. We already mentioned Lee Arenberg, Harry Lennox. I mean, good God. And then on top of everything, it was like a very young Jack Black. Like and not to mention Fred Ward as well. And Pamela Reed, who I'm a huge fan of because I'm a fan of the Mr. Bean movie, but that's a completely different story. And again, we've already mentioned Giancarlo Esposito. It's crazy. The cast of this movie is actually insane. But yet most of the actors are used effectively twice. Most of them are just news anchors and or aides for Bob Roberts.
Yeah, they're there for a moment I thought it was interesting. I'm a fan of the, why does the name of it escape me all of a sudden? James Spader show.
Oh, Boston Legal.
No, the one where he's a criminal.
Red List, Blacklist.
Yeah, Blacklist. God, I watch it. I watched every season, and it escaped me. But James Spader's in this briefly as a news anchor, and then Harry Lennox is in it following around Bob Roberts' campaign, and they are both in Blacklist. Harry Lennox plays the FBI assistant director.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's cool, man.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Huh. Can you imagine that? I mean, like they probably never even saw one another. Like I don't even know where they were shooting the scenes of like Spader and Lennox or not. Well, I guess they never even, like James Spader's never on screen, like for real on screen.
He's on a television screen.
He's on a television
in the
screen.
movie.
Yeah. Similarly to like Helen Hunt and I think Susan Sarandon, like they're not actually in the movie. They're in the movie on a TV screen playing essentially what in any other movie would just be maybe a real live newscast and or just a character actor or some random actor.
And Fisher Stevens is in Blacklist.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ. The Blacklist connections to this movie.
6 degrees of separation from
apparently
Bob Roberts.
And Ray Wise was in that show with the guy from Dale and Tucker versus Evil. Was that show called like Satan? You know what I'm talking about? Where he plays the devil. Have you never seen this show?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not a show that anybody would have remembered, but it was on the CW. So the CW, otherwise known as the Supernatural Network, as they would call it. So also Jeremy Piven's in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in this. I wouldn't even mention Bob Balaban, who's playing like the Lorne Michaels of the movie. Just like such an obvious stab.
He nailed it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, even when they're not being given much to do, like Tom Atkins, fantastic character actor, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, on top of all the other things that he's done in the horror genre, not given much to do, but nice to see him doing just kind of, playing a stereotypical doctor character. But if you understand what's going on in the movie, which the movie makes it pretty explicit, what's going on with his spinal injury, guy is a monster, just like the rest of them. Mm-hmm. It's awful. It's just everybody is terrible in this movie.
Well, and to your point earlier about how the only part of the universe you see is Bob Roberts' universe. So it all that stuff it makes you feel a little icky when you watch it, because it's like, oh God, how are people letting this happen? Like you see right through it, but it's only because we are seeing through it.
But to be fair, people also let it happen because they want it to happen.
Yeah, true.
I mean, again, there are how many people that are surrounding Bob Roberts in this movie? Ray Wise, Alan Rickman, Harry Lennox. Like that's 3 people right there. And Tom Atkins. That's 4 people that surround him that are essentially sycophants. They do what he wants and that's it. And they will do whatever he needs, like faking an assassination, like all these other things that they end up doing for him. I mean, Alan Rickman is really the villain of the movie, obviously, but he's
kind of the money behind the whole thing. Is he like
he's like
the financier of okay, let me back up. The gist I got from when Ray Wise's character and Alan Rickman's character get introduced in the beginning is they're the guys that kind of discovered Bob Roberts and thought, let's prop him up and make him a candidate.
I think Alan Rickman and Tim Robbins worked together. Like Bob Roberts and whatever the hell his character, Lucas Hart III, I think, because they mentioned the whole thing about Bob Roberts being part of the company that was
Broken
involved
Dove or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So I think they like work together. I think the movie is even more nefarious than it pretends to be. I think the movie is really trying to like needle these like backroom nasty dealings that like Iran-Contra, stuff like that, where people were involved in these horribly illegal things and were okay doing it because, you know, furthered their bank account or furthered the American, you know, military industrial complex, whatever. But that was the gist that I got, that Bob Roberts was like he was somebody that they had already worked with and like knew about. And him, honestly, to me at least, he's a businessman first, a singer second, and him being a singer is only incidental because that's the easiest way that he feels to get his message across, which makes him even more evil and even more just dastardly as a character, because it's not even about the music. It's just the music is the earworm that gets you to follow along.
And it's kind of the smoke screen the smoke screen that's being put up.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's this fun folksy thing going on, when really there's this, you know, we brought up the Broken Dove thing. There's this whole like drug thing happening that's being done through Broken Dove, and if he becomes president or senator, then he's able to allow these things to keep happening, and that's what that news reporter figures out. And it's cool how they stitched it all together, like the plan.
Well, there's more going on than the movie kind of lets on, because again, like we've mentioned, there's some kind of backroom dealings and things we don't see, because what we're watching is a documentary we're watching a fictional movie about a fictional person, but it's all being presented as real. So we don't really see a lot of the stuff that we would be able to see in a normal narrative. So we're like you mentioned, we're missing out on the conversations that Tim Robbins and Alan Rickman are having behind the scenes. Every time we see the campaign, they're well composed, they're well organized, they look like they know what they're doing. But then you have someone like Giancarlo Esposito, who is just, you know, is an investigative journalist. He just keeps stirring the pot and throwing them off their game. And I love that this movie, every time we see the Bob Roberts campaign, it's like there's nothing that could phase them. Everything has to be perfect. It's all about putting on airs. And if you were making something like this and you cared about these kinds of things, you would be trying to control it the best you could. Also, it makes perfect sense. That's, again, it's hewing close to reality. We've never seen the conversations that were had about things that have happened in our country in the last decade, because people know things about things that have happened that they're never going to talk about, but they had to have had a conversation about it at some point, because otherwise the things that happened couldn't have happened. They don't just happen in a vacuum. People have to talk about it, but those conversations are never going to be recorded or anything. Those people wouldn't even talk about having those conversations. And that's what I love about this movie, is it wants to, even in spite of not being as entertaining or as straightforward or as on the nose as it could have been, it wants to portray this as real to what it would be as possible. And that is commendable.
Yeah. And I think they pulled that off.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, a lot of credit goes to something like Rob Reiner's, like we mentioned, Spinal Tap. I mean, that movie, you know, it created the mockumentary genre, at least in a lot of people's minds. It created it. I'm not sure I would go that far, but it's one of the big ones. It's the big one that you could point at, and like most people would know who that is, or most people would know who Spinal Tap are. But this movie has that same feel to it. It's not as irreverent, but that's not the intention. The intention is not to be, I don't think this movie's funny. This movie's not funny at all. It's not a laugh riot. It's a pretty dark movie.
Yeah, and it's got some cringy moments.
Well, and where the movie ends up is just, it's awful. I mean, where the movie ends up is really dark, and the movie kind of sits in that moment in a way that, again, movies like this tend to not. It really lets the audience take everything in and form their own opinion, even though, again, it's clear the intent of the filmmaker and the bent of the filmmaker in what direction.
Yeah, and I was, as we said before, how eerily similar it is to tactics used today. And I was thinking of those comparisons. there's focusing on popularity or the populist approach to being a politician, using music and media, encouraging division, sowing doubt, and like among your base, and then like tensions with the media, and
there.
You see all the same stuff today. And maybe that's just always been going on, or that's something that, the minds back then said, like, this is just going to start getting worse and worse. Let's make a movie like that where it's really bad. And I don't know. I wasn't around back then.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, going and looking and kind of judging the landscape then, there was that going on. It's just now it feels more focused. Like before, it was like the media is a mosquito, pesky bee, smack it out of the way. Now it's like, oh, I used to have a fly swatter. Now I have a fucking sledgehammer, and I'm going to take it to task, even if it's like not really that big of a deal. Like it is, if you make the media a big deal, they are a big deal. But like, don't Streisand yourself. Like, don't make it worse. Don't make it worse while trying to stop it. That's the thing, and that's why the whole fake news thing exists. Because instead of trying to fight it, it's just, well, there's no legitimacy to your message, which is how you undercut all of it. You just say none of it's true. Nothing you're saying is true, and only information from me is factual. It's like, okay, gotcha. It's funny though. You mentioned, Bob Roberts and his message in the movie. I want to read a couple just lyrics from his songs.
Okay.
Some people must have, some people have not. Some people will work, some simply will not. But they'll complain and complain and complain and complain. Like this, it's society's fault. I don't have a job. It's society's fault. I am a slob. I have potential no one can see. Give me welfare. Let me be. Hey, bud, you're living in the land of the free. No one's going to hand you opportunity.
All wrapped up in a catchy tune.
Right. How in this universe, if you're listening to that song, do you not go, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah. I've heard all those things said by either other candidates or news programs.
Right. And that's what's actually insane about the movie is that, like, all these things that they're saying, I want to be rich. I don't have a brain. Just give me a handout while I complain. That is the perception. That is a genuine perception that people have. And again, there are people like that. But it's not everybody. You can't say everybody's like that, and so we can't help anybody. And that's this message of, once I've gotten you on board, like, I can tell you anything.
Yep.
I can
eat it up.
Yeah, I can literally lie to you, make a fool out of you, because that's the thing. In my mind, that's the thing about this movie that is kind of funny, is that ultimately you can laugh at the people in the movie, because it is a movie and they are ridiculous. And those people in the movie are fucking idiots for believing the bullshit that Bob Roberts is sowing. And yes, he gets elected, but he gets elected because he subverts reality and, gets fake assassinated. He wouldn't have won otherwise. They make that pretty clear in the movie. But in a lot of ways, it's kind of like Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles is a movie about how dumb fucking racists are. Bob Roberts is a movie about how dumb people who follow with no autonomy of their own are, regardless of who you're voting for, regardless of what it is. If you are a sycophant, if you are a follower with no autonomy of your own, this movie is making fun of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the ultimate message of the movie. Again, we kind of talked about it before. Ask the questions constantly. Don't just take information at face value. If you don't do those things, you're a sycophant. I guess, well, you're a follower. You're a sycophant if you're then propping those things up or just agreeing for agreement's sake. But for me, that's, again, the bent of the filmmaker is going to be whatever it's going to be. You can't make something without the bias coming through. Even if you're, making the most dry documentary possible, your bias is going to come through as a filmmaker. So that filmmaker's bias aside, this movie is not about making fun of conservatives or Democrats or anybody. It's about people that don't actually think for themselves. And that is something that's more important to take to task than you voting for someone, because you not asking questions, you not being informed is worse on a lot of fronts than just politics. It's terrible on what you put into your body, how you take care of yourself, what you do, this, that, and something else. Like, it's terrible on all accounts. It's not just a political thing. Like if you're uninformed, you're going to go and eat at a bad restaurant and maybe get sick. You know what I mean? We live somewhere where people are just now starting to use restaurant rating apps. Like just now, it's becoming more of a thing. You know, if you don't use those to look at where you're going to go eat, you could go eat somewhere and get sick because, you know, XYZ, or go eat somewhere that their food is not very good compared to the price or whatever it is. But not being informed, it kind of is pervasive. It's everywhere. It creeps into your daily life.
And now more than ever, the tools are there to be informed, but there's also a lot of misinformation noise out there that so you got to sift through the shit to find the stuff that you
and that's
need
the problem.
To be informed. Yeah.
But that is a solely almost political issue with political information and things tied to political demographics or social politics, stuff like that. There's not a fake news website about Shen Cafe, or fucking, what's the big restaurant here in town? The Laszlo's. It's not like someone's running like a anti-Laszlo's. Like Laszlo's uses fake chicken meat in there. Like nobody's doing that. But you know what I mean? Like, but yet when it comes to politics, they are. And I think it should really inform people that if they're willing to do that for that singular thing alone and almost nothing else, unless you're a big corporation trying to take advantage of people in other developing nations like Hershey and Nestle and all the big boys try to do. They're doing disinformation because it benefits them. If people are willing to do that for politics must be pretty important to somebody, huh? Having control and power must be important, huh? If people are willing to spend this much time and effort to change your opinion or affect your opinion, even one crank of the dial.
What's it doing for them that it matters so much?
Yeah. Is it getting you elected to be the next governor or senator of Pennsylvania? And then you're able to use that as an opportunity to do God knows what, because you don't get just elected president out of the blue. Even Barack Obama was an alderman. Even Barack Obama was a senator, right? He was a senator, wasn't he?
State senator. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't get just elected to president. You have to. And that's the thing about this movie. That's Bob Roberts too, right? I mean, that's the sequel to this movie is Bob Roberts becomes president, but you get to see how the dirty tricks and the dirty tactics become even more pervasive the higher up he gets in the political structure, in the political ladder, the hierarchy in our country. Because again, this is the problem with this. The real problem with this movie is not an international film. This is not a film people overseas can enjoy unless you want to see what happens in our country. But this is in a lot of ways, a uniquely American film. Like the bigoted messages that Bob Roberts is profiting are not uniquely American. There are racists everywhere, and there are people all across the world who've been a lot more racist a lot longer than our country's even been fucking around. But like the message in this movie, I think is kind of a uniquely American problem in a lot of ways.
Yep. And the show House of Cards almost picks up in that next level where Bob Roberts leaves off. The dirty tricks and the underhanded stuff.
Everything you've ever heard or assumed or was kind of under the guise that you think this is happening, House of Cards just goes, yeah, we're going to show you what that would be like if it was. I mean, maybe those things are happening in real life. I'm sure there's a shade of reality to it, but I don't know how many. Well, what's the character that the guy from I was Corey, the guy from Ant-Man, the guy from the guy from The Strain plays the main character. He's they force him to kill himself in the show.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's actually happening in real life, but like people have said that. Like, just go Google how many people the Clintons supposedly killed, stuff like that. It's like it's rooted in a nugget of truth, but it's taken to that nth degree because that's what's fucking entertaining. That's what's cool. You want to see somebody actually say, okay, what if the system operated the way everybody assumes it does?
So I looked up if any presidents have been shot before an election, see if they maybe had staged it. And there was one. It's back in 1912. Roosevelt
during his speech
was shot and then continued to give an 80-minute speech.
Give his 80-minute speech, right?
But they actually pulled a bullet out of him.
Yeah. And you know why? Because Teddy Roosevelt, because it was Teddy, it's not FDR. Fucking Teddy Roosevelt was right?
A
like
bull moose. Bull moose.
What do you fucking say about Teddy Roosevelt? Like, go read some books about Teddy Roosevelt. Don't take it from us.
Well, and it says in this article that he was an experienced hunter and anatomist, and because he wasn't coughing up blood, he knew he could continue with his speech.
Yeah. Well, it's not in my lungs, so I'm okay. I'm not going to start getting short of breath or suffocating on my own blood. So, yeah, I'm fine, right?
And in the quote, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose.
Fuck yeah, man. See, and that's again that folksyism is why he was elected. That's why you get excited like I do about Teddy Roosevelt, because it's the everything about him. It's like it's the aura of Teddy Roosevelt, and that's cult of personality that this movie trades in. And that's what we have seen in reality, is politicians existing less on what they believe and more in what they say they believe or what they think you believe, and they can parrot it back to you and that you'll believe it.
Or it's like, or just, wow, he's badass, I'm voting for him.
Right. Like I'm that's not how this works.
Nothing else. Just, wow, he got shot.
Cool. Well, but what does he think about X, Y, and Z? Well, I don't know. Well, then why are you voting for him?
But he got shot and lived, so
that's cool.
He's my president.
And that's kind of where, the movie of Bob Roberts takes that kind of fanciful final step of faking an assassination and then going the further step of faking him being paralyzed, which I think is just like, if you're not going to kill him, you have to have something about him be altered forever. And it's something where he's clearly not willing to give anything up. So it's not like he's willing to have his legs taken off or his arm taken off or go blind or something. So he'll just pretend to be in a wheelchair. And who is going to question someone? They're going to go and tilt someone out of a wheelchair on the hope that they're actually meant to be in there. And if they're wrong, what happens then?
Don't they show him tapping his foot?
They show like a shadow of him like walking at one point.
Yeah.
It's fake, obviously, but it's funny because, again, everybody believes it, and they're sending letters of condolence, and people are all sad and upset. And it's like, oh my God, how has no one actually done this yet?
Yep.
It's fucked up, but to go to, again, like you mentioned with House of Cards, that's like that nth degree. It's the final step. It's the logical final place that that show or this movie goes is to make it satire. You have to push it all the way, at least in House of Cards isn't really satire, but it kind of is. Bob Roberts has to push it to 11 and go that final step.
You know what else they got right? Zoom. Because when they like have him on the screen when he's laying in his hospital bed or whatever, they've got him like video conferenced in. and you do that today, it's just a Zoom call or something like that. But
yeah. Again, the movie is, I don't know why it's not talked about more. It's weird to me that people aren't talking about it. It's weird to me that it wasn't, like, clips of it weren't being played constantly in 2016 and the lead up to 2016. Yeah. Like, I do not fucking understand how nobody just went, this is like the movie that was made 20 fucking plus years ago at this point. Like, this movie's 30 years old.
Hung up on The Simpsons predicting the future.
Right. As opposed to like looking at this movie and saying, no, they're all terrible. They're all up to no good, but they will tell you otherwise just to calm that little nag at the back of your brain saying that they're not.
Something we didn't mention, kind of all over the place, but so he's a businessman. They're trading stocks on the campaign bus.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. And then he hops on a motorcycle sometimes in front of the campaign bus in his fencing gear.
He also admits to insider trading at one point. It's like straight up. He's like, I had the information ahead of time, so I sold the stock. It's like, you just admitted to fucking securities fraud.
And everybody's cool with it.
Yeah. Because again, what does it matter? They're working with Alan Rickman's character, who is just like, any rich, erudite, white campaign funder, I guess. He's just funding the campaign. Like he's a Coke Soros figure. Yeah, right. Like that's the way he's painted.
Yep. There's also the lady. She was like, "Oh, we just love you so much, Mr. Roberts. I wish I could vote for you 3 times." Or wish there was a way we could vote for you 3 times. And he's like, oh, there is.
Again, it's just the movie just really, it nails all of the kind of things that we now are seeing in real life. And it's wild because I hope in the next 2 years that this movie comes up more. Really, we're living in it now, even more so than 4 years ago.
Share this podcast, Kulturecast listeners.
More people should watch this movie again, if not for the fact that it is mildly entertaining. Again, it's hard to find a movie like this entertaining when, when everything happening is just like, even the scenes that are kind of innocuous. Like right at the end, you think like, oh, they're like, oh, they got him. Who got him? Oh, like a crazy right-wing supremacist killed Giancarlo Esposito's character in jail. It's like, if this were to actually happen that way, that is what would happen. That is what would happen. Totally. It's like, even in its closing moments when the documentarian who's been following Bob Roberts the entire movie, played by Brian Murray, plays Terry Manchester, he goes and stands at the Jefferson Memorial and he reads the words, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." And Terry Manchester as a character is our eyes and ears. And it's interesting because he is an odd man out. He is clearly from overseas because he's British, but he's South African, but he's playing a British character. So he is kind of the odd man out. And I think it was really smart for Tim Robbins to have a Brit be the documentarian. I think they could have done more with it.
Yeah, how so?
I think they could have had him questioning Bob Roberts more. I know why they didn't, because it wouldn't make sense in the narrative, because why would they let this guy keep hanging around?
Yeah, they'd boot him out. Yeah.
Right, they'd boot him out. They do that with Giancarlo Esposito. But I think what's smart about the movie is in that last moment, when we see him at the Jefferson Memorial, I think that's the film that he's making. Because again, this is supposed to be a fictional film made by him. The film that he's making, I think that's like the explicit rejection of Bob Roberts for that character. And I think that's the intent of him as the fictional filmmaker, is to show us that it needs to be rejected.
Yeah. And
right?
There's some moments towards the end where the documentarian starts, you see him start to be kind of uneasy,
right,
about what he's witnessing. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting movie.
It's a tough watch. It's not funny. It's funny, but it's not funny. Not the way you would expect it to be funny.
But good to watch.
Important. It's an important movie to watch. If you're going to watch something that's not just the news, but you want to watch something that has faces that you recognize, mild entertainment, quote unquote, value, it's definitely a movie unlike anything else. There's not a lot of movies like it. It's kind of its own thing, which I think in and of really itself is something worth kind of championing. So your final thoughts on Bob Roberts, Dustin?
Well, I mean, we just kind of hit it. It's an important movie to watch, I think, especially right now, as more tactics that were used in Bob Roberts you're seeing today, where it's almost like somewhere someone took bullet points from this movie in '92 and are applying them. So here, and whether it be a presidential election or a Senate race, I mean, you'll see this stuff used, and maybe that's always been in the playbook, and it, like you said, it's just amplified, but it was just interesting to see it, the way they portrayed it. And I thought Tim Robbins, I don't know, did a good job on that movie, because he was director, writer, and starred, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think it was done really well. It's makes you think, makes you, question things that you should. And yeah, it's an important movie to watch, and I don't know why more people haven't seen it.
I don't either. We didn't really talk about Tim Robbins a whole lot. The role of the movie, again, it's one of these things. You and I have been talking about it a lot. Ted Lasso. It's a thing now where like you inhabit that role, like you live in that character. Tim Robbins lives in the character of Bob Roberts. Like it's so convincing. It's so believable. And that's the thing about this movie. Like you've kind of mentioned, it's an important movie because it is so believable. The fact that Gore Vidal is in this movie and they didn't give him mostly scripted lines. They were just like, hey, just tell me how you feel about this right now. And it's just him talking about how he actually feels. That adds to the reality of this movie. But the problem with this movie is in '92, maybe wasn't the reality. Now it is the reality. And that's, like you said, that's why it's so important. And again, I don't care who the fuck you vote for, because that's not my choice. That's your choice. But what's important to me as a content creator, as a person who's part of society like you are, is to ask questions of people when they tell you things. Get to the bottom of things, ask questions. Don't go off on I'm just asking questions tangents like some assholes like to do. But if you feel like you need to ask why, then ask why. And most of the time, you should ask why, because you'll maybe get some information. Maybe you'll get more. Maybe you'll find something out. But don't just take everything at face value. Don't take a guy who gets shot and is in a wheelchair at face value like this movie is telling you to. You know, I'm not talking about in real life, don't go harass people in wheelchairs, but if this were to happen in real life, you would hope that people would be asking the questions that they're not in this movie. And that's the thing that this movie is important about. It's important about the idea of asking those questions, whatever they may be, but you have to be engaged and part of society. Asking questions is being part of society. It's actively engaging in the societal contract that so many of us make. We've all made if we live in this country. And if you live in a country that's not the United States, you've made a societal pact with your country that you live in to do certain things and not do certain things. I think we should all be involved. I think the fact that more people don't vote is ridiculous. And I think the fact that the number is like less than 75% is nuts. I don't care who people vote for. Just go and vote. Just ask questions. And that's what Bob Roberts ultimately asks you as the audience to take away is just participate. And if you end up participating and you find out terrible things about the people that you thought you were going to vote for, or vice versa, it's okay to change. It's okay to say, I was wrong. Yeah. It's okay to be wrong if the people were misleading you intentionally.
Right. You're not stuck on a team. Right.
This is not sports. This is literally our lives. This is existence. Winning and losing. Nobody wins and loses here when everybody is uninformed. We all lose when people are uninformed, because then we don't get to have the serious and honest discourse that so many people want to have and so many people don't want to, or don't even know that they don't want to because they've been told that they can't or shouldn't. Mm-hmm. So on that note, we'll take a break and we'll play a preview for the final Kulturecast of Grab Bag Month.
Just call me Angel of the Morning, Angel.
Hey, radio. What's the matter? You don't got a quarter to put in the jukebox?
Are you Lucchino?
Hey, turn that off.
Come here a minute.
Whoa!
I have something private I want to see.
Whoa!
Dad!
Jimmy is a man on the edge. If you've ever felt like fighting back, if you've ever felt madness surging inside you, you know this man. A man who hurts.
Patsy Comanza? I'm calling in reference to financial obligation you have to Ben Angelelli.
That's none of your business.
We'll see about that, Pat.
It's summertime, 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 summertime.
Hey, waiter. Tell this character to turn his radio off.
What are you eating, shrimp? You're gonna tell me this song doesn't go with your shrimp?
Hey, yo, Mike, that's my son.
If you've ever felt everything closing in, if you've ever felt ripped apart by passion, you know this man. Jimmy, a man who loves like he hates, a man who hurts.
I told him,
Get rid of him!
I can't do that, I never will.
Never. You forget never. This is now.
This isn't gonna get your money back, Dad.
This has nothing to do with money!
I can't.
I should have strangled you in your crib.
I tell you, Jimmy, why don't you call me when you're ready?
I can play this piece. I can't. I need you to want me. If you don't want me, I just can't do anything.
What you gonna do, Duke?
I can't seem to relax. My hands just don't work right, and my mind starts interfering. Can you understand that, Ma?
Welcome back home. Dad?
motion picture creates such a sensation, some will love it. Others will be angered by it. Everyone will be stunned by it. Whoever you are going to be touched by fingers.
That's right. On the final Kulturecast of Grab Bag Month, we're going to be talking about a movie called Fingers. Don't know what it's about. I don't remember at the moment, but we're going to be joined by my good friend, one of the hosts of another show that I've mentioned already once, Scary Stories We Tell, a show that I think, don't you do like album artwork for that or something?
I might.
It's like, wait, what? Yeah, you should go check that show out. But yeah, Jess Byers going to be joining me. We're going to be talking all about it, and it's a movie that's an actual movie, not a horrifying look into the future. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Probably not. Well, normally I let someone plug something, but Dustin, I always forget that there is nothing for you to plug because you have nothing to plug because you thankfully don't engage in the idiocy of self-promotion on social media.
Who knows? One day, who knows?
Only you know. As for me, Weirding Way Media is where you can find all the shows that I work on, this one including Scary Stories We Tell and the Projection Booth podcast, which is a movie podcast similar to this one, but it's hosted by Mike White, and it's a lot more what's the word, educational, as we would say. A little less of a yuck fest and a little bit more of a yes, tell me more fest.
I'm a fan of the yuck.
Me too. I like being the yuck guy, but it is fun to go over and have a more serious conversation, because serious conversations can be fun, folks, and they are. As for me, though, that's where you can find me. As for this show, Kulturecast.com, Patreon.com/Kulturecast, all the good places you can go to donate monetarily or just check out the show, rate, review, like, subscribe, all those things that you can do to support us non-monetarily. You should totally do on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this on. Dustin, thank you for joining me as always.
You bet.
And we'll catch you on the next episode.